Sunday, July 13, 2025, we visited the Gilgandra Rural Museum. Not sure if that's its correct title, but it's the one that I've given it. There is so much stuff in here, from old Arnott's tins, biscuit tins, Uncle Toby's rolled oats tins, and out the front, some very interesting windmills. Never gave any thought to different windmill construction over my lifetime. I thought what we had was what we had, but there's a couple of different versions of head construction here in this museum. So if you have a bit of a look, if you keep watching and wait until they come up. So the show's inside buildings and outside buildings, and we were in a rush. Probably need to go back. We didn't give this the time it deserved, but luckily we were in a rush and got cracking because there was a major accident on the highway and we had to divert by quite the number of kilometres as we headed northwards. So given that we're in a rush, I don't get some of the light sources correct and don't necessarily get it all, and we breeze through fairly quickly, so this moves fairly fast, unfortunately. On a positive note though, there will probably be more music than talking, which is always good in my case. There were some Singer sewing machines back there a little bit too. I've got one of them in my shed. Unfortunately, poorly preserved. I took ownership of a lot of this stuff when my parents died. My family's never done anything that well on keeping things in good condition, unfortunately. I do leave more in than I normally would, and there's some blurry bits, but I've left them in this case. There is also the story of a man named Yap To. May need some pronunciation work there. A Chinese man who worked as a carpenter on property named Ingledale before moving to Gilgandra. He died in 1924, learned carpentry in China, stayed with the new owners of the property when it changed hands in 1906. I guess my point is there's a lot of social media stuff going around at the moment about people, and I don't know how old they are, but wanting to go back to the Australia they grew up in. I'm not sure that the full and correct history of Australia is taught or making its way through to the masses, as Chinese, for one race, had a huge impact on a developing Australia, as did the Afghan Cameleers in the outback. Just a few thoughts. So here we are on the outside again now as we transition from building to building with a couple of those differing windmill head constructions. So this really odd looking head is called an iron turbine from Mast Fusion Company, Springfield, USA. And this one resembling 44 gallon drums or old tin cans cut in half and welded around an axle on the vertical on a vertical axis to catch the wind and spin. Arnott's biscuits certainly were beautifully presented back in the day. Packaging like that today would cost more than the biscuits. Old kerosene fridge. We used to have one of them in the dairy. Kerosene lanterns or lamps. Had plenty of them over the years. And the old ashtray where you'd push the button down and the thing would spin around a little bit and the bad gear would go down in the container that you'd empty. Chap in here has a similar flannel on to me. Different hat, but I'm still in beanies. It says that this old pit toilet was donated to the museum by Ron and Pat Foran, Baringa, Gilgandra. So on this windmill, the sign says Plavia Windmill, origin and age unknown, believed to be the only one in Australia, donated by M.E. Nielsen. I guess you could stop that as well, but I've got plenty of gaps between talking. Now, in here is my first memory of corporal punishment. Well, aside from what was dished out by the old man, the old woman, grandparents. Lying on the table up the front here shortly is what is known as a cane, and I've broken plenty of them over my hands and backside over the years. My first dosing was, I was 7 years old. I do remember it, primary school. Would have been 1970, probably exactly 70, 71. And I busted up all the head teacher's pumpkins. The head teacher lived on the grounds on the northern end of the school. I busted up his whole pumpkin crop on the Vero pitch that was up there as well. So I got 6 across the knuckles for that. It was an interesting method of caning. I think he was the only one that hit me across the knuckles. But I had plenty over the years, became quite impervious to that pain. No one hit with a cane though. No one even came close to the headmaster of the private school I was sent to in the late 70s, mid and late 70s. I'm sure he had a larger cane than what was standard. He could put 6 on the same spot. You would bruise for weeks, and sometimes he'd give you a bonus 2. You get 8 for the price of 6. Well, there were the prefects and the seniors, of course, but they had a varying array of weapons. They weren't into using the cane. The old dairy didn't quite work like that. The cream can didn't go there. We had a dairy when I was a kid, maybe 25 cows. As with most things we did, poorly done. Cream separator there, and you'd milk the cows, separate the milk from the cream. The cream was what we sold. The milk we'd feed to pigs was going to cost quite a bit to upgrade to being a milk supplier, so we stopped dairying. The cream would sit in the cream cans in a trough full of cool water with the cream cans draped in hessian bags that would soak the water up and keep the cream cool. And from memory, cream was collected on a Tuesday and a Friday. You'd lift the cans up onto a truck and off they'd go. Those sensational clouds. It was a good cloud day. Old headers or harvesting equipment. Early cotton picker up the end here. Now we're about to enter the big shed, and my goodness, there's almost something of everything in here. I haven't done it particularly well because we were in a hurry. I use that as an excuse anyway. But there's some stuff in here. I didn't expect to see the amount of stuff in here that is in here. There's interactive things along through the shed where you can't remember if it was a sensor as you walk past it started or whether you had to push a button. But anyway, a number of points that would talk back to you, tell you about the stuff there. An old PDO driven hammer mill with the ability with the front tray to run either grain or slide your sheaves of hay in and crack that up, or just the top bin there, you could just run some grain through there. You could also run grain through the top bin, slide hay through the tray and get a bit of a mix. On the bottom of the cyclone there, which is the big bolus bit, there's the ability to attach two bags with a lever on the outside, changing which bag it goes to. So you fill one bag, change the lever over, remove that bag, put a fresh empty bag on while the other bag fills. Back in the day, did a few hours around one of them as a young bloke. Gilgandra, of course, quite rural. You'd find wheat, barley, canola. From a cropping perspective, you'd find perhaps cotton, sheep and cattle. So quite the whole bag of agricultural pursuits at Gilgandra or around Gilgandra. The Gilgandra Rural Museum, Gilgandra, on the highway north-south.